Okay, so you ready to dive deep this time? We're going into some pretty wild territory today. You flagged this for us, and we're going to see what we can make of it.
Yeah?
Excerpts from the Law of One, Session 1. Get your, scientific journals and your history books. This is a whole other animal. We are dealing with a written record of a claimed channeling
Right.
from an entity calling itself Ra.
That's right. And this source material, think of it kind of like a transcript of a conversation. Supposedly, this happened back in January 1981.
Wow.
This group, they were seekers. They were looking for deeper understanding, and they made contact with this entity, Ra.
Okay.
And Ra states that they're part of something called the Confederation of Planets in the service of the infinite creator.
Yeah.
So already we're in some pretty unusual territory.
Definitely off the beaten path. I mean, it really stood out, and I think what probably stood out to you as well was just the core idea that Ra throws out there right at the beginning.
Yeah, front and center.
They say, quote, all things, all of life, all of the creation is part of one original thought. I mean, that's a big one to just drop right out of the gate.
It is. It's a huge concept, and it's what we're going to try to explore in this deep dive. We want to unpack these fundamental concepts that Ra presents in this first session, understand what they're trying to communicate,
right,
why it might be significant, without getting too hung up on, is this channeling real, is it not?
Right. We're not here to validate or debunk the source itself. We're just looking at the ideas.
Yeah, just the ideas themselves, what's on the page.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So to help us navigate this pretty fascinating and admittedly kind of out there material, we've got our expert here. So
happy to be here.
Let's jump right in. Rock kicks things off talking about the very nature of reality. And it's a bit of a perspective shift, to say the least. They tell the group, and therefore you are not part of a material universe. You are part of a thought. You are dancing thoughts in a ballroom in which there is no material.
Yeah.
All right, so unpack that for us. What's the immediate implication if we take this at face value?
Well, I mean, it's really interesting, right? Because it kind of flips our everyday experience on its head. I mean, we assume we're living in this solid, tangible world.
Right.
And Ra is suggesting that it's more like a sophisticated illusion, that at the most fundamental level, everything that we experience is akin to thoughts within a larger consciousness.
Oh, wow.
And this actually brings to mind certain philosophical ideas, and even some interpretations of quantum physics.
Oh, interesting.
Although it's framed in a very different way, of course. And if our reality is fundamentally thought, that our own thoughts become incredibly potent. Right?
Yeah.
They shape our experience in ways that we maybe don't fully appreciate.
It's almost like we are characters in a cosmic story that's being imagined into existence constantly.
That's a great way to put it.
And Ra really drives this home by posing some very direct and very personal questions to the group.
Yeah.
They ask, quote, what thoughts did you think today? What thoughts were part of the original thought today? And how many of your thoughts did the creation abide? Was love contained? And was service freely given?
Yeah.
These are not just like abstract philosophical rambling.
No.
They feel like really pointed prompts for each of us listening to kind of look inward.
Absolutely. I mean, if reality is indeed thought, then the quality and the direction of our individual thoughts becomes so important.
Yeah.
And so Ra's questions, they encourage a deep self-examination. They push us to consider, are inner dialogues aligned with this original thought?
Right.
Are they characterized by love and this desire to be of service to others? It's a perspective that puts a lot of weight on our individual internal world.
Okay, so moving on, Ra then begins to define their own identity and purpose.
Right.
They make a distinction saying that they are not those of the love or of the light, but rather, quote, those who are of the law of one. They explain that in their vibrational state, quote, the polarities are harmonized, the complexities are simplified, and the paradoxes have their solution, we are one. This feels like a really crucial piece to understanding what Ra is all about.
It really is. I mean, this law of one seems to be this core operating principle for Ra. And by identifying as being of this law, they're suggesting a state of fundamental unity that exists beyond the usual dualities that we perceive.
Okay, right.
Right, this idea of harmonized polarities and simplified complexities points towards an underlying oneness that kind of permeates all of existence. So they aren't just about love or light as separate concepts,
Right.
but about the unifying force that integrates everything.
And their stated purpose is to transmit this law of one, this concept of unity, of everything being interconnected to humanity.
Right.
And they even claim to be, quote, old upon your planet,
Okay.
and to have, quote, walked your earth in the past,
Mm.
specifically mentioning interactions with the ancient Egyptians. So this is where it gets really intriguing for me. If they have this history with us, why aren't they interacting with us directly now?
That's a great question. And their reasoning is that past direct physical interaction was, quote, not efficacious,
Okay.
meaning it didn't really work out as intended.
Mm-hmm.
And they felt a, quote, great responsibility of staying in the capacity of removing the distortions and powers that had been given to the law of one.
So,
This suggests that previous attempts at, direct engagement led to their message being misunderstood or even manipulated.
right.
And so now they seem to be taking a more indirect approach, focusing on conveying the fundamental principle rather than physical intervention.
And they even mention this commitment to continue this transmission until the current or next, quote, cycle is appropriately ended.
Right.
And they emphasize their nonlinear understanding of time.
Hmm.
So it's like they're operating on a completely different timescale, a much longer view than we typically consider.
Exactly. Their perspective on time as nonlinear is crucial for understanding their long-term commitment and also perhaps their seemingly detached view of, immediate events on Earth.
Right.
They're focused on these much larger cycles of consciousness evolution, the bigger picture, as it were.
Okay, so speaking of the Egyptians,
Yeah.
Ra confirms a connection to the Ra, known by them describing it as, quote, congruency.
Interesting.
They explain that their social memory complex made contact with the Egyptians to communicate this law of one
Okay.
through someone who, quote, heard and understood. This sounds like a significant historical claim, at least within this text. So when they say social memory complex, what are they referring to?
So essentially they're describing this as a collective consciousness
Okay.
or a shared pool of experience and understanding within their group.
Hmm.
Think of it as a unified field of awareness that all members of their group can access.
Oh, wow.
And yes, they are claiming to be the origin of some of the core spiritual understandings in ancient Egypt.
But they also point out how quickly this message was, quote, distorted by the priests and peoples,
Right.
losing its inherent compassion because of an overemphasis on polarity, on this versus that, good versus evil.
That's a critical point.
Yeah, even if the initial communication was successful, its interpretation went awry.
Precisely. And it highlights the challenges inherent in transmitting complex spiritual ideas and this tendency for human understanding to gravitate towards duality and separation
Right.
rather than the intended unity.
Right.
So even with the best intentions, the message can be filtered through existing beliefs and biases, leading to significant alterations.
And this distortion, according to Ra, led to their withdrawal and the resurgence of understanding centered around polarity.
Interesting.
So it's almost like a cyclical pattern of knowledge being introduced, then misinterpreted, and then needing to be reintroduced again in a different way.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, it underscores this ongoing struggle to grasp the concept of fundamental unity
Yeah.
in a world that so often appears to be defined by divisions and differences.
So this brings us directly to the core of the law of one, this concept of unity and infinity.
Okay.
Ra asserts that the universe is infinite and therefore must be unity, stating, quote, that which is infinite cannot be many, for manyness is a finite concept to have infinity. You must identify or define that infinity as unity. So they're laying out a pretty direct and logical argument here.
They are. The logic is that if something is truly without limit, infinite, then there can't be separate distinct parts that are also infinite, because that would imply more than one infinity,
Right.
which is a contradiction in terms.
Right.
So therefore, true infinity necessitates a fundamental underlying oneness.
Okay.
All the diverse forms and experiences we perceive are, from this perspective, simply different expressions of that single infinite source.
And they use a really helpful image to illustrate this, I thought.
Yeah.
Quote, you have seen the prism which shows all colors stemming from the sunlight.
Right.
It's a very simple but powerful analogy for how one source can manifest in a multitude of ways.
The prism analogy is very effective in making this kind of abstract idea more tangible.
Right.
So just as white light contains all the colors of the spectrum,
Yeah.
the one creator encompasses all of creation.
Okay.
The different colors we see aren't separate entities,
Right.
but different facets of the same underlying light.
Okay. And then Ra throws out this really mind-bending notion, quote, in truth, there is no right or wrong. There is no polarity. For all will be, as you would say, reconciled at some point in your dance through the mind-body-spirit complex.
Hmm.
This really challenges our entire framework of morality and judgment.
Yeah, it does.
So when they mention mind-body-spirit complex, what are they referring to in this context?
So that's essentially Ra's way of referring to the holistic being,
Okay.
what we might think of as the interconnectedness of our thoughts, our physical form, and our spiritual essence. And yes, this idea that there's no ultimate right or wrong is a radical shift in perspective from the standpoint of ultimate unity. The distinctions we draw between good and evil are seen as temporary constructs within our current level of understanding. Everything is ultimately part of the one, and therefore at some point all apparent contradictions and polarities will resolve themselves within that unity.
And the culmination of this is their powerful statement, quote, "You are everything, every being, every emotion, every event, every situation. You are unity. You are infinity. You are love, let love. You are this is the law of one."
Wow.
That is a lot to wrap your head around.
It is.
If we are everything, what does that even mean for how we interact with each other?
Well, I mean, it implies a fundamental interconnectedness that goes far beyond what we normally perceive, right?
Yeah.
So if we are truly all aspects of one unity,
Yeah.
then our actions and thoughts have this ripple effect throughout the entire creation.
Wow.
The boundaries that we think exist between ourselves and others, between ourselves and the universe, are ultimately illusory. So it suggests a deep responsibility for our actions
Right.
and this profound potential for empathy and compassion.
That's a lot of responsibility.
It is.
So interestingly, when the group asks about, quote, coming planetary changes,
Okay.
Ra's response is quite detached. They say, quote, "The changes are very, very trivial. We do not concern ourselves with the conditions which bring about harvest." This almost sounds indifferent to events on Earth that we would consider pretty major.
It does. And this detachment makes sense in the context of their nonlinear view of time and their focus on the much larger cycles of spiritual evolution.
Okay.
So from their perspective, specific planetary changes might be seen as relatively minor events
Right?
within the grand cosmic scheme and this journey towards unity.
Right.
So their primary concern seems to be with the harvest,
Okay.
which likely refers to the spiritual progress and evolution of souls rather than specific physical happenings.
So the conversation then shifts to how we learn and teach.
Okay.
The questioner asks about accelerating understanding in others.
All right. And Rez's response is quite insightful. Quote, "The distinction between yourself and others is not visible to us."
Interesting.
They go on to say, quote, "To learn is the same as to teach unless you are not teaching what you are learning." So what's the core message here about how we share knowledge?
The key here is this emphasis on our interconnectedness
Okay.
in the realm of learning and teaching, because Ra perceives no fundamental separation between individuals.
Right.
The act of sharing your understanding with someone else is inherently an act of reinforcing and deepening that understanding within yourself. It's a reciprocal process. However, it also carries a responsibility.
Okay.
You need to be authentically living and embodying what you're trying to teach
Right.
for the exchange to be truly meaningful.
They also introduce this idea of, quote, group individuated consciousness as a way of sharing understanding.
Okay.
It sounds like a level of awareness beyond just individual thought.
Yes, it suggests a state where individual consciousnesses can, in a sense, merge and share understanding.
Going beyond the limitations of a single isolated perspective. This might be how Ra's social memory complex functions a unified field of awareness and shared experience.
And even if we feel like we're only reaching a few people, Ra stresses the value, quote, "To serve one is to serve all."
Right.
That's a powerful reminder that even small acts of sharing knowledge or offering help can have a much wider impact.
Exactly. Because of this fundamental unity, any positive contribution to one individual ultimately benefits the whole.
Right.
It underscores the importance of striving to share information and understanding as clearly and accurately as possible, even if the immediate impact seems limited to just one person.
Ra also makes this point that our very being demonstrates the original thought and that distortions arise from the unexplained nature of being. It's like simply by existing and grappling with our own existence, we're already part of this cosmic thought process.
That's a crucial point. Our existence itself is a manifestation of the original thought. The distortions arise when we don't understand or can't articulate this fundamental truth,
Right.
leading to feelings of separation, confusion, and lack of connection.
Yeah.
The act of seeking to understand ourselves and our place in the universe is, in a way, a process of reducing these distortions and coming closer to understanding that original thought.
Finally, the session concludes by touching on future communication and this very specific way to care for the channel.
Oh, okay.
Rai expresses their willingness to continue communicating through this instrument and gives very specific instructions for after the contact,
Hmm.
including silence repeating her name, Harla or Alrak, laying on of hands at the neck, and offering charged water infused with love.
Ah.
The detail about not touching her until she responds to her name due to potential fatigue is very specific.
Yeah.
What do you make of these practical instructions?
Well, these detailed instructions, they really emphasize the delicate nature of the channeling process as it's described in the text,
Right.
and the need for respect and care for the individual acting as the conduit, and this focus on love and intention in the charging of the water
Right.
reinforces those core themes of unity and the power of consciousness that run throughout the session.
So as we bring this deep dive into this first session of the Law of One to a close, what are the really key insights that should stick with you, our listener?
Yeah.
We've journeyed through this idea of reality as fundamentally thought,
Right.
the central concept of the Law of One as ultimate unity rose claimed connection to ancient Egypt, and the interconnectedness of learning and teaching.
It's a lot to consider.
It's a lot to consider,
Yeah.
but what stands out most to you?
I think for me, the most impactful takeaways are this radical idea of interconnectedness, that we are all facets of one original thought,
Right.
that the universe is fundamentally unified, making our perceived separations more of an illusion.
Right.
Also, this power of our own thoughts in shaping our reality, and the profound link between truly learning something and being able to teach it authentically.
It really prompts you to think about how these ideas resonate with your own experience of the world. Does this concept of underlying unity feel like something you intuitively grasp?
Yeah. Or does it feel completely foreign to your everyday perceptions? How might the idea that reality is fundamentally thought shift how you view your own thoughts and their impact?
Right.
And what about those questions that Roe posed about your thoughts about love and service in your daily life?
Yeah, these are all important questions, and it leads to a really compelling question, I think, for you to consider moving forward.
Yeah.
If all is truly one original thought, how fundamentally does that reshape your understanding of yourself, the people around you, and the very reality you inhabit?
Wow.
Does it inspire a greater sense of empathy and connection, or does it remain an abstract and perhaps challenging concept to integrate?
That's a powerful question to sit with.
It is.
Thank you for joining us on this truly unique deep dive.
My pleasure.
We encourage you to explore these ideas further on your own, see what resonates. Until our next dive, take care.
Take care.